Howdy, my name is Ananthan Natarajan and I am going to explain about the procedural placement scattering tool which I made in Houdini. This procedural placement scattering tool takes in an input image map which specifies an area inside which you want to place the assets randomly. Uh, the other input is basically the assets which are either in OBJ or FBX formats. You can add any number of assets and map these assets randomly into the specified area in your input image map. As you can see in the tool here, the input area map has a default PNG image and the default size of that is 50 cross 50, which means your input image map, which has to be a square PNG image, is mapped into a 50 by 50 area. You also have a default OBJ object which is randomly placed inside that specific area. When you look into the mapping options, you have two attributes. One is the color and the other is the inverse mapping. I have a few example maps. I'll choose one of those example maps and explain how it affects the tool. So as you can see, this input area map attribute has a default map in it. I'm going to choose a different one. So I'm gonna make sure that I can see the map and show images, and so I'm going to use this map, and as you can see, this image has a black background with a red colored area. So now, since my mapping option is being pointed to the black color, it's picking only the black color in the map and randomly placing the assets inside the black area. So as you can see in this, I have a density texture. That's the reason why I have only a fewer models on this side and a large number of models being placed on the other side. But other than that, now as you can see, the assets are being randomly placed in the black area and the other area is being left out. So now if I choose the inverse mapping, you can see that the assets are being mapped or placed only into the area which contains the red color. So now the other option that we are going to see is called density scale. So this increases or decreases the number of assets which are being placed. So as I decrease the number of assets, you can see that fewer number of assets are being placed inside the map. And as I increase it, a large number of assets are being placed. So now the tool has a default texture on it, and that texture is being used as the density texture. The density texture is basically a grayscale image, and white refers to the most dense and the black is the least dense. So now I'm going to pick out a density texture, which is a black and white image. I'm going to choose this one. So I'm going to inverse the mapping. So you can see that the density texture is affecting the placement of assets. Black area on the left is least dense, and when it goes towards the white, it becomes highly dense. Even if you decrease it, as you can see, it basically follows the density texture. So even if you increase the density scale, more number of assets will be placed into the high dense area and less number of assets will be placed in the less dense area. And I can also toggle the density texture on and off. So now as I switch it off, you can see that assets are being placed evenly all around the area. Next option that we are going to look into is the randomization options. So this randomization option is for the points which are being chosen to map the assets. So as I change the point seed, you can see that the points are being altered. And I also have relaxed iterations, and I also have a scale radii by attribute. The next advanced option that we are going to look into is the asset options. You can have any number of assets being mapped into the same area, and these asset options can be used to affect those assets. So I'm going to add a new object, like a different object. So I'm gonna hit this plus sign, and it will ask me, it will make a different geometry file, and I'm gonna update a different model, and I'm going to increase the scale so that it becomes visible. And as you can see, I have two different models. I'm going to increase the scale more so it becomes more visible. Okay, as you can see, I have two different types of trees which are being mapped into the same area. Cool. So now I have a randomized placement of these assets in the mapped area. So now when I change the random asset scale, the points remain the same, but the order in which the assets are placed changes. So in the same point, there will be different assets as you change it. So the points don't change. And I also have an asset scaling range that affects the scaling range of the entire, both the assets. So if I change the scaling range from 2 to 1.5, the scale of the entire thing changes. So when I decrease it to 1.2, so yeah, as I add one more asset, as you can see, the three assets are being randomly placed, and I'm gonna increase the scale a bit more so that it becomes visible. So you have three different types of trees. Now let's look into the difference between the random asset seed and also the global point seed. So as I change the global point seed, you can see that the points change. But when I change the random asset seed, the points don't change. The order in which the assets are placed changes. And I'm also going to use the density texture now, and that's going to affect the entire mapping. So fewer assets are placed in that area, and large number of assets are placed in this area, and it all follows the input map. So when you change a different input map, something like this,
The assets are placed accordingly, and you can export it using the FBX render node or the file export option in Houdini.
and if you need more help with the tool, this tool also has a help page. So when you click the question mark icon, this opens up a page in which the entire tool is being explained. You also have examples of how the input map looks like and how the density texture looks like, and the explanation for each of the attributes that makes a difference in the tool. And you also have help options when you hover over each of these attributes.